Data, you must accept that I'm your mother. You do it not because you want to, but because you're supposed to. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Inheritance, which is episode 10 of season 7 of Star Trek The Next Generation. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, one episode at a time. In this video I cover the 7th season episode Inheritance. So Inheritance is the episode where the Enterprise travels to a planet to help with geological instability, and the scientist assigned to help them turns out to be claimed to be Data's mother. That is, that she was Dr. Soon's husband, and that she helped create him. Data at first is very dubious and doesn't really believe it, but then is convinced that it is in fact the case, and so he goes all in on getting to know her, and they make friends. She admits that the reason why Dr. Soon didn't take Data with him to that other planet when he was escaping the crystalline entity was because she convinced him not to, and she felt very guilty over that, but the two of them reconcile. However, Data starts to suspect something is up with Juliana Tainer, and as soon finds out his suspicions are correct, that she is in fact also an android created by Dr. Noonien Soong. There's a message within her program with a holographic image of Dr. Soon, who points out that she is not aware that she's an android and he would like to keep it that way, and that there was a real Juliana Soong, or O'Donnell was her maiden name, but she died from her injuries sustained during the crystalline entity attack, and so Dr. Soon was able to create an android and transfer all of her memories into the android, so that the android is essentially her and is set to live out a normal lifespan and then die. And Dr. Soon, the holographic version of him, pleads with Data to not tell her about her true nature and let her live out her life. Data debates this and what he should do, but eventually ultimately decides not to tell her about it, and then they just part ways on good terms. So, if you don't understand my intro, it was a reference to Lost, because the actress who plays Juliana Tainer, Data's mother, I'm not going to try to pronounce her name. I know Stephen Kennedy, Patreon supporter, tried to get me spelled out phonetically for me, but I don't remember. Fionnula something, I don't know. Anyway, she was an actress who was later in she's been in several things. She was in the DS9 episode Dax. She's going to be in an Enterprise episode Fallen Hero, where she plays a Vulcan. But she was also in the movie called The Others, and I mainly know her from Lost, where she played an important character of, guest character of Eloise Hawkins, who had knowledge of future events, shall we say, in that show. So that's mainly what I know her, and that was kind of a quote from Lost when she said, "You do it because you're supposed to." So when I first saw Lost, and I saw her in Lost, I instantly recognized her. I was like, hey, that's Data's mother. Now, I didn't remember her from Dax or Fallen Hero. It was like, oh yeah, like I did recognize when I saw her in Fallen Hero. I did recognize her. I was like, oh yeah, that's Data's mother. But Fionnula Flanagan. Let's see if I got that correctly. Anyway, yeah, she's a really good actress, and I think she does a really good job. And yeah, I always thought of her as, even in Lost, I thought of her as Data's mother, or at least when I first saw her. Then I got to know her as Eloise Hawkins, so if I ever saw her in anything else, I'd be like, oh, that's Eloise Hawkins. But I first knew her as Data's mother, and she's not the last Lost actor that will appear in season 7. I'll get to the other one pretty shortly. The other one's actually a main cast member of Lost. And when I first saw Lost, I was like, hey, it's, Admiral Pressman. But I'll get to that one soon. So I never really cared for this episode. I didn't hate it, but I never really liked it that much either. It just seemed like, they're just adding to Data's background. So this is the thing with season 7, is that season 7 is not season 4, but season 7 is definitely the season of family, where all these family members come on board, and they have tons of episodes where they're family members that maybe the audience have never seen, or that the characters haven't heard of, or maybe they have seen, where they come on board. We have so many episodes dealing with family. We've had a couple so far, like Interface, we get Data's mother. Dark Page, we get Troy's mother, which I know is not unusual, but we do find out that Troy has a younger sister who died when she was young, so therefore she finds out about a family member she never knew that she had. And then there's this episode. Then there's Homeward coming soon, where we see Data's Worf's foster brother. We get Picard has a long lost son who turns out not to be his son, and we get like Alexander traveling from the future, and God, I'm sure there's other ones. There's just a lot of family. Oh, Beverly Crusher's grandmother. Oh God, what a gem of an episode that one was. But anyway, so this is the theme of season 7. So this episode always kind of blended into me. Plus, it's more like just a running joke of how many family members Data has. Like, he has the most family members that show up. It's ridiculous how many family members he has. So first we meet his brother, then we meet his father, then we meet his grandfather, then we meet his father, and then I guess Dex is the mother, but then we're going to meet his younger brother that they didn't know that he had, and then we're going to meet his human brother. And then before that, we met his great-great-great-grandfather. And later, we're going to meet his great-great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. I'm not sure if I'm doing the correct amount of greats. I'm just guessing. And, yeah, what else? We're going to meet his... I don't know what you call the resurrected self, a different version of him. And so there's so many, and then we see, we also get his daughter. I forgot to mention his daughter. We also get that. And then we will meet another daughter, twins, later on. And how many fucking relatives do you need to give Data, for Christ's sake? And even though some of the ones I mentioned will come after this episode, still at this stage, when I first saw this episode, I was like, I wasn't buying it. It felt tacked on. It felt like a retcon. Do you know why? Because it is one. Because it's supposed to be. No, sorry. It is a retcon. And I think, they do their damnedest. To be fair to the writers here, they do their damnedest to try to shove it in there and come up with excuses as to why she really exists and Data never heard of her. So, kudos for them. They're trying to justify it. But it still feels, no matter how many justifications they write in the script about, she, her mother didn't like Dr. Soon, so she had to marry in secret, and that's why she used her maiden name, and that's why Data didn't know that they were married, and she felt guilty about leaving Data behind, so that's why she never contacted him all these years, and yeah. I don't know, but it just, yes, all those excuses do work, but it just doesn't feel like, it feels like a retcon. Because here's the thing, if they had this episode in like season 2 or even season 3, then I would buy it. I would be A-okay with it, no problem. But to have it in season 7, the last season of the show, even if it wasn't the last season of the show, it's still season 7. Like, it's too late. It's, sorry, you waited too long. It's too late to introduce a long-lost mother. And especially after we see all these other family members, the daughter, grandfather, father, brother. Like, do we really need a mother as well of this android? Like, why does Data get so many goddamn family members? Anyway, so when I was watching this episode yesterday, as I normally do for these reviews, I try to come in with a clean slate, not prejudge it, and try to analyze it deeply and judge it on its own merits. Sorry, I was just I can't see, but my cat just peeked his head up over my computer, so while I was talking, I just saw these eyes like slowly peek up and then go back down. It was very distracting. Here, I gotta show you. Where are you? Yeah, peeking from me from the computer like that. Anyway, sorry. Let me readjust the camera. Anyway, so you keep staring at me. Anyway, so where was I? Oh, something about Data's mother and how this is, I don't buy this, and yeah, it's. So I tried to judge this episode on its own merits. That's where I was. And, I actually got into it more because of that. Because I think when I first saw this in every, subsequent time afterwards, I was just immediately off-put by the fact that this is so late in the game and it seems like a giant retcon, because it is one. And that was a huge barrier to me for this episode. But when I tried to set that barrier aside and look past it, it's actually kind of good. It's actually a really good episode. I kind of like the relationship that they create between Juliana Tanner and Data. And once I ignore the fact that this is most clearly a retcon, they're just making up excuses as to why try to shove her into this story. Once I look past that, like, it's a pretty touching story about someone who feels guilty about and the way she acts around Data like a mother, and she like starts telling embarrassing stories, but Data's like, she's like, oh, I'm gonna embarrass you, and Data's like, I'm incapable of feeling embarrassed, please continue. Like, that's interesting. That's like interesting to see how Data would deal in these typical mother-son relationships, but in his own android way. And of course, he's a bit upset when he learns that there was a whole childhood that they erased from his memory that he doesn't remember, where he would go around naked and whatnot. And also, of course, he was, upset, and not really upset, but, in his android way. And then also, he was upset in his android way when he learned that she abandoned him. And I love how she was very upset. She started crying and he was going to speak, and she sort of like hushed him and then ran out the room, and he just looked perplexed. He looked confused. And I thought that was very interesting, because it made me feel like he was processing this data, no pun intended, and trying to, see how to react, to sit with it and see how he felt about it. And next time he talked to her about it, he just asked for clarification. He's like, well, if there was if your son was organic, and would you do the same thing? And she said no. And then it was like, okay, is that because you value human, organic life more than androids? And she was like, absolutely not. She was like very, very firm in that. She was like more of how devastated and painful it was to deactivate Lore when he turned evil, and I was so scared that I would have to do the same to you, and I didn't want to put myself through that. So it was actually kind of the opposite. And to be fair to her, it's not like she left him there to die. Like, he was activated by the Starfleet who came and was able to live out a normal life. Now, did she know exactly for sure that was going to happen to him? No, but they didn't kill him. They left him out in the open where he could be activated. But that is kind of abandonment. But she was only human. And now I do wonder, once we input the information we get at the end of the episode about how she died from her injuries of I was going to call it Silicon Avatar, but that's the other episode. Data is the Silicon Avatar. No, of the crystalline entity. Is this still true? She was like injured or dying, did she tell Dr. Soong to leave Data behind? Because that would also explain why, if she was like dying and in pain, that would also explain why she was like leave him there. But that's really interesting. Now, so once I look at it, I do like the whole Data learning about his mother thing. I think that was again a really good dynamic. The storyline where we find out she is an android, I'm a bit more shaky on that one. This is, I think, is what really turned me off too when I first saw the episode. I'm like, really? First of all, especially when they revealed that she died by the crystalline entity attack, and so Dr. Soong created her shortly after. How was he able to create such a much, much better android than Data in such a short amount of time? Unless it took him years, but that doesn't seem to be the implication. The implication seems to be that she died like right after they left, and that he created her very shortly after she died. So how was he able to create such a superior android right after he created Data? And then that was like a couple decades. How come in all that time he didn't create another android? Now, I don't believe that Picard Season 1 retconned it to say Soong created other androids. I think how they did it is they said that Alton Soong, I believe his name was, created other androids with Maddox. So all those androids that live in an android colony were created by the two of them and not Noonie and Soong. But since I brought up Alton Soong, speaking of retcons, even though this is a retcon done later on in Modern Trek with Picard Season 1, which was a terrible retcon. You call it one of the worst retcons in the whole franchise. Alton Soong, Dr. Soong has an organic son. When the fuck did this happen? Now, you could, if you wanted to be really, aggravating, you could take this episode and say, oh, well, maybe Juliana Taylor, or not, was it? No, O'Connell was her name. Juliana O'Connell. Tainer is her new name, when she married her new husband. But anyway, you can say that her and Noonien had a son, and that's who Alton is. But when did this happen? Who raised him? What? There's no mention. There's no goddamn mention. I'm sorry. This whole Alton Soong, he just appeared out of nowhere. So I wouldn't. I wouldn't say that's just a retcon that doesn't fucking exist. Like they should never ever mention him ever again. Although they did have to mention him in Picard Season 3, I believe. But Yeah, god damn it. But speaking of Picard Season 1, what Nooning Soon was talking about, he didn't say he transferred her consciousness into the android. He said that he duplicated her memories. So this is different than what they did with Picard in Picard Season 1 when they transferred him into an android body, because they're saying they basically took his consciousness and transferred him out, which is what Ira Graves did back in Season 2, and we attempted to do that, where he attempted to transfer his consciousness into Data. Well, he was successful, but then it didn't quite work, and Picard convinced him to leave. But that's not what he did, which makes me wonder why. I mean, I guess you could say he's just not as smart as Ira Graves, but then again, Ira Graves didn't create Data. He soon did. So maybe they just have different specialties, I suppose. But if Ira Graves is able to do it, why isn't fucking Ninian Soon able to do it? But whatever, it's not that big of a deal. But yeah, I just thought it was noteworthy more than anything that it's different than what Picard did or what Ira Graves did, because he actually, Juliana Soon died, and then he created another android with her memories. So it's a different entity, where we're meant to believe that Picard lived and his consciousness was transferred into another body. But if you think about this could be a metaphysics kind of argument of maybe Picard did die, and that new android, even though it has his consciousness, is actually another entity that is just a duplicate of Picard. I know that's not what the show is telling you. So really, it is Picard because that's what the show says, because it's written right there in the script. But I don't know. It is a thought experiment that one could have. But anyway, enough of Picard Season 1. Oh, speaking of future events, though, after this episode does set up B4, who we see in Nemesis, because Juliana Tainer mentions that there were 3 prototype androids created before Lore and Data, and so B4 is obviously one of those. What a stupid name, though. I didn't even get this at first. B4, stupid. But how do they know that he was going to only be a prototype and there were to be other androids after, and they just call them Beef? I don't know. It's just stupid. But anyway, so yeah. But at least that explains B4's appearance in Nemesis. It was actually set up for in this episode, to be fair. Now, a couple other things about this episode. The Juliana Tainer has a husband. Why? Why does he exist? There's this scene with him where he goes up to Riker. It's you did double check his findings, right? Talking about Data. But it's because he's just a machine. You can't trust him. And then shortly after, Data's does an excellent job, and he's oh, I was wrong about him. And that's really all we get. So what's the fucking, this character serves no purpose whatsoever. I mean, they might as well just have mentioned that, if they wanted to say that she had a husband because she has a life on the planet, they could just say, oh yes, I have a husband, he's at home knitting sweaters or something. We don't need this character. He is so unnecessary. Yeah. But some things I did like about this episode is that they mentioned Lol, and I do love that continuity. In fact, I do believe this is the only time that Lol is mentioned outside of The Offspring, which is one of my favorite episodes, as you know. You might know if you follow my channel. And yeah, so I appreciated that they mentioned that. I love how Juliana Tainer was very upset when she heard about the fact that Lol didn't survive. It was like, what right do you have to just create an android and then have it die? It shows her trauma at having to watch the other androids die, and it proves that she does see them as sentient beings. So I love that. And there's also a deleted scene that I saw on the Blu-ray, which I actually wish they included it. It would have been one of my favorite scenes of the episode. Now, they mentioned that the scene is kind of redundant and doesn't really give any new information, which is why it was cut. But it's a good character scene, so I think they should have kept it in. So, if you notice in the episode when Juliana and Data walking the corridor, and Data goes to Counselor Troy's room, and she's like, "Oh, I'm glad your sexual program is working." And Data's just like, "What? No, she's a counselor." And she's like, "Okay, sure, whatever, I get your Data." And walks off, which is kind of a weird scene. But I remember watching that scene thinking, like, why don't they show what Data says to Counselor Troy? Because I would love to see that scene, because I think it would be very interesting. I love the Data Counselor Troy scenes a lot. And by the way, she's hinting at a relationship between the two of them. I think it should have happened. And it would have been, and the deleted scene shows Data going into that room. But if it hadn't, it would have been my headcanon that Juliana Tena was right. But I still wish that the Trada, or Doi. No, I don't like Doi. Trada. I think Trada is better. I still think that the Trada should have happened. Doi. Anyway, so the deleted scene actually shows what happens when Data goes into Counselor Troy's quarter and he's talking to her about it, and they bring up Lol again, which I wish this scene was still in there. And he talked because Data was asking why she was being so sort of motherly or hanging over him and overprotective and stuff like that. And Troy pointed out, well, you were that way with Lol the entire time she was alive. And he was like, well, Lol needed my help. She was still developing. And Troy was just like, yeah, but you probably would have continued to be that way even past that age, because that's how parents are. That's a nice scene. I love that. That's a good character scene. I wish they would have kept that scene in. But then, Troy also said something about how Data was confused why she didn't take him with them when they left Omicron Theta, and Troy's like, well, why don't you ask her? So they're setting up because this is obviously before she revealed the information, the Data. So that was nice. Then there's they're doing a concert. There's I never realized this as I was watching the show until Honest Trailers and other people pointed out to me, Lower Decks mentioned this as well, how they have so many freaking concerts in this show where they're just playing classical music or whatever. And of course this is just to set up that she was an android, which again, I'm iffy about it. I don't totally think it sucks, because it does at least create a moral dilemma, which I thought was really interesting, that Data was stuck with this decision of whether or not he should tell her who she is. And it's really powerful, because I love how Data says, I'm being a bit selfish. My judgment is not completely objective, because it would be really nice to have another android around, so I know I'm not the only one, and I can acknowledge that freely. But then Troy points out, if you tell her that she's an android, you would be robbing her of the one thing you sought your whole life, to be human. And that's powerful. That actually was quite powerful. So I did, so ultimately decided not to tell her. And the thing is, I was trying to decide if I thought Data did the wrong thing or the right thing. And I think this is a clear case where there is no right and wrong answer. So I know there's some, and again, everyone can decide for themselves. I'm sure there's some people who come down one side or the other on this issue. Like, part of me was like, no, this is dumb. He should have told her, because Dr. Crusher made up the really good point about people might find out anyway, and wouldn't she rather hear this from her own son than some stranger, which is a good point. And plus, like, even if she never finds out, someone's going to find out when she dies, and they open her up and see this fucking android. So it would have been nice if he told her at least, and she could decide what to do with that information. And that he's kind of deceiving her and robbing her of the knowledge of who she really is by not telling her. But on the other hand, then I think to Troy's point of it could destroy her life. It could be very depressing for her. And even if it isn't, he'd be robbing her of the thing that he sought his whole life. So, yeah, I'm split. I think this is a case where there's no right answer, and Data just trusted his gut, which, again, I love those episodes. This is part of why I really like this episode, because it really explores Data's humanity. Now, I watched this review that's so frustrating. I don't know why I still watch this channel. They always refer, especially if it's an episode about Data, because they always call him a robot, and they compared him to like a computer, like a laptop, modern day laptop, and like, oh yeah, when my laptop died, I cried too, or something, making fun of Juliana for saying that she cried when the android died. This is so fucking frustrating to me. Even if you don't believe the conceit of the show, you have to go with the show. Like, you have to go with warp drive exists, transporters exist. All this shit is completely fantasy, unrealistic. But if you're watching the show, you have to go with the conceit of the show. And the conceit of the show is Data is not a fucking just a robot. And this was proven in Measure of a Man. That was the whole point of that fucking episode. That he's a sentient being. He just happens to be artificially constructed. And yes, there is a goddamn difference. Sorry, but there is. Between an android and a robot. Look it up. I Googled it. They're all fantastical terms, by the way. But the difference between a robot is just an artificial being. An android is an artificial being meant to look like, imitate, and behave like human beings. That's the difference. And that difference is made even more clear in Star Trek itself, where Data, when Q called him a robot, he's like, I am not a robot, I am an android. There's a difference in the Star Trek universe. They make this extremely clear that Data, the whole objective of Dr. Soon was to create artificial life that is human-like, to give him human abilities to grow, to learn. They didn't give him emotions because when he tried to do that with Lori, he turned evil, so he did another version without emotions, but apparently he perfected it right after to do Juliana and to duplicate, although he was sort of copying the real Juliana's brain patterns or whatever, so that could explain how he perfected the emotion. And then there's the emotion chip, which Data does install, but then the writers retcon out of existence. It just disappears. But then, of course, the androids in Picard Season 1 all have emotions, so they definitely, Maddox and fucking imaginary Alton soon, they perfect it. But anyway, that's future shit. Point is, Data's not a fucking toaster. He's not a computer. He's not like a modern day computer laptop. He's a sentient being. This is what the whole show has been trying to hammer down. So he's not a fucking robot. It's like a Good Place where that Janet, and whenever anyone calls Janet a robot, she's like, not a robot. And when they call her a girl or a human, she's like, not a girl. Like, it's fucking Android. And there's a difference, because they're all fantastical fictional terms anyway, but there's a difference in the Star Trek setting. So again, if you're going with the conceit of the show that warp drives exist, transporters exist, there's a difference between robots and androids, and Data is not a robot. Anyway, and plus, as I said, like, sometimes the writers treat him like a robot, and those episodes suck, like, in theory. But episodes like this one, and like Silicon Avatar, or I don't know, a couple other good Data episodes, treat him as a complex, sentient being who's capable of being human, showing humanity, but in his own android way. And that's when he's always at his best. Anyway, I'd now like to thank my Patreon supporters for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does really help me continue with the channel. I'd like to welcome new Patreon supporter Jordan Johnson and give you a very special thanks. Thanks so much for your support. I'd also like to give special thanks to Antarius and Brandon Neal Howes. Thank you both so very, very much for your strong support. I would also like to give a shout out to Benjamin Mead, Greg Marley, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Valls, Alessandro Migueliseo, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So we have a few Patreon comments on this episode. First comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, how many relatives and kin does one android have? 1, Lore, brother. 2, Dr. Ira Graves, grandfather. 3, Dr. Noonien Soon, father. 4, Dr. Juliana Tainer, mother. I'm stoked they didn't bring in Data's granny into TNG. 6, B4, second brother. 7, Dr. Eric Soon from Enterprise, great-great-grandfather. 8, Data's ghost, Picard Season 1. And 9, Dr. Alton Soon, cousin, I think. No, he was more of like a stepbrother, I think would probably be the better term. Or half-brother, maybe. Something like that. 10, Dal, Soji, and others. 50 nieces, I think. Well, they called Dal and Soji his daughters. I don't know if that analogy holds. It's been a while since I've seen Picard Season 1. 11, Kor Soong something. 12, Adam Soong, who cares at this point? Amen to that. 13, Data Reborn. 14, Android Picard, last episode in Season 1 of Picard. Feck, I don't know. I don't really care at this point. Yeah, Android Picard is more like a distant cousin, I think. This is Data's family tree. Maybe I missed someone. This is up there with the Borg, as both are becoming a complete joke. Actually, he did miss someone. LOL. His daughter. Come on. Anyway, all this crapology that all Star Trek writers did, diminishing the one thing Data actually did, and that was the creation of Law. I also wonder, was Spot an android cat? At least he told Mammy about his daughter. Now back to the episode, whatever it is about. Oh yeah, Mammy Data. I remember a friend saying, what happened when she cuts her finger or gets sick or even goes to the hospital for a checkup? Does she shut down? Maybe this is the reason we only see Lore in only a few episodes. He was looking after Mammy. I absolutely hate the family cliches as horror uses it so much. This episode wasn't so bad until Fionnula Flanagan became an android. I should start Star Trek dumbest writers next. Only Data would check out if Dr. Juliana Taylor was his mammy, or was she a con woman from Dublin in Ireland. I would have liked to see Data and Deanna Troi as a couple, as I always liked their scenes together. Best relationship in Trek that never happened. I know you would say B'Elanna and Harry, but Harry wasn't even promoted, so there is no chance in hell he would have gotten into a relationship when he did. Janeway shouted at him. So my rating is 5. What will happen when Dr. Juliana Taylor dies and they figured out she was an android? The husband will be pissed off at Data for not telling him, as they will find the device, so they will learn the truth from Dr. Nudian soon. Out of 10. That is a good point about her husband finding out from the chip, but maybe he'll be too stupid to know how to operate it. Well, surely he can find someone on that damn planet who can figure out how to hook it up to a hologram thing. I don't know. But anyway, so oh god, what was it that I wanted to touch on? Oh, just for clarifications, there was a couple responses to this comment asking about, Spot being an android, and Steven clarified that he was just joking. He doesn't actually think Spot's an android. But that's, to me, it's a missed opportunity that they didn't have Spot in this episode. Like, they should have brought out Spot, and Data should have showed, like, when Juliana went into his quarters, you should have seen Spot, and it's like, oh, you have a cat, why do you have a cat? Oh, and that's so neat that you actually feel the need to have companionship like that. Like, that would have been nice to have. Like, all you need is like 20 seconds a brief Spot cameo, but I guess it's difficult working with cats. Now, I don't know if I would say I prefer B'Elanna and Harry over Data and Deanna Troi. That's actually a hard one. I like them both. I think they're both the best couples that never happened. I've been a huge component of Data and Deanna Troi for a while now, although I just noticed it this time around to this rewatch. But back in season 3, I was like, hey, these two should have hooked up. I think I actually might prefer Data and Deanna Troi. I think I might be with you. But B'Elanna and Harry will be a close second. And I disagree. The fact that, and you might be joking again, but the fact that he never gets promoted, that doesn't make a difference. And in that case, it's more frustrating. Well, in this case, they put Deanna with Worf in season 7, which is fucking stupid. They should have done Data. But then she does end up with Riker, which I think is the best match, actually. So where she ends up, I think, is probably better than her being with Data, because that's what's meant to be. That's what the show set up from the very first episode. Whereas the Harry and B'Elanna thing, Tom and B'Elanna never worked. They had no chemistry. They were just flung together. And there's 1 or 2 episodes where the relationship works and is nice, but for the most part, they got no chemistry. They shouldn't, and they kept pushing it until they had them get married and then showed a future when they even had kids. I'm like, they should have separated them. They never should have got them back in the first place, where B'Elanna and Harry had chemistry from the very first episode. You had to go off of existing chemistry. That's what Deep Space Nine did. They saw the chemistry between Odo and Kira. They saw the chemistry between Worf and Dax, and they build off of existing chemistry that was already there instead of just flinging 2 characters together who have no chemistry. Chakotay 709. Anyway, sorry, I'm gonna get off on that rant here. And yeah, Tom and B'Elanna absolutely 1000% fall into that category of no chemistry, and the writers just flung them together because they wanted to. Anyway, sorry. Always gonna rant about that. Next comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, as Soong told Data, you tell her she's a humanoid, not an android. You do it because that's what you're supposed to. Okay, 'tis the season of new or not seen before family members or other aspects of characters' past/backstory this season. I have to admit, it's the acting of Fionnula, Flanagan, and an intriguing twist that Soong had a spouse And then when she passed, he created an advanced android I do find quite intriguing and does not seem so out of place. As such, I don't know the unknown natural brother and was the original Juliana's the mother. And the oddity that her existence does not seem to be, and records bring up yet again why so much of Dr. Soon's existence is not so well documented or already known by Starfleet, but okay. Once you get behind the reveal of the mother and how she and Data bond, and hooray, an actual acknowledgement of the existence of Lal outside of the offspring, there are some good 7-season stories here. Data's big choice of course is to whether to let her know she is an android or not at the end, and how that comes back to Data's whole issue of existence and wish to be human, I do admit. Hey, it does continue the character growth of Data that I really like. I will give it 8 definitely not lethal falls to Dr. Juliana Tainer out of 10. They were trying to play it as if it would be lethal, but anyway. Oh yeah, there was something, sorry, I want to go back to Stephen Kennedy's comment for a second, because there's something he said about what happens when she pricks her finger or has a cold or has to get at a doctor. Well, they explained this, actually, in the episode that Dr. Crusher said that she has human anatomy over top of the android structure to fool people into thinking she's human, and that it gives false sensor readings and full scanners to give out biology. So she actually they mentioned that she had hypertension, so she has high blood pressure. So even, I don't know if she really had high blood pressure. I think they revealed later that once they found out she was an android, that it just simulates high blood pressure. But that's why that all the doctors were fooled. They did explain that. But anyway, back to Norman Buckwell's comments. Thank God, yes, they mentioned Lal. And it does make me wonder, like, because Data mentioned in this episode that he would consider building another daughter. That was very interesting. To me, that was a very interesting tidbit to know that he was considering doing it again, which I don't know, I guess we're meant to believe he did with Soji, but I don't know the connection there. I don't think it was actually Data. I think it was Maddox and Alton Soon. You gotta roll my eyes every time I say that name. But it would have been interesting if he did try that again. But then again, the show's coming to an end soon, and they weren't going to do that in the movies. So, I think that would have been an interesting thing to explore. Yeah, I am not so sure that I liked the reveal that she was an android. I think the episode might have been better off without it. I don't know. Anyway, next comment is from Antarius, who says, The family season continues. I think the writers were aware that it was a bit odd that she would show up after all these years, so they made up a story to explain her resilience. The reveal that she is an android is a good twist, but it's really hard to believe that the scanners in sickbay are so easily fooled by some kind of device. The story about the planet's core is easily in the top 10 of least engaging plots. At least we get to see the cave set again. My rating is a 6 out of 10. So you bring up a very good point that I forgot to mention, so thanks for reminding me. We get a B plot. Now, technically, it's not an anomaly. It's like geological unstability or whatever. But some of those B plots are like that. So this is the first episode like this that we get in a long time. I think I can't remember. True Q back in season 6 was kind of one, but not like a really strong one. If I remember correctly, I think that was the only one in season 6. Season 5 had 7 of them. And if you don't know what I'm talking about stories, not just stories with A plots and B plots, because there's plenty of those, but I mean stories with an A plot that's a character story And the B plot is just some bullshit anomaly or crisis or some bullshit to create tension that has nothing to do with anyone and nobody gives a shit about it. It's just there to create some tension in the episode, but the focus is supposed to be on the characters. And this is the only one I think that we get in season 7. I'm trying to think forward. I don't think there's any coming. I will correct myself if we do come across one and be like, oh yeah. I mean, there's definitely A-pod, B-pods. Definitely. Like the, what's it called? Thine Own Self, where Data's on the planet and we get another plot with Troy trying to become a commander, but there's no anomaly bullshit. And funny enough, the episode before this, Force of Nature, I didn't mention that in my review for that episode, but that's the exact reverse of the cliche I'm talking about, because the anomaly was the A plot and the character stuff, like the stuff with Spot and Data, was the B plot. So it was actually the reverse of the trope that I'm talking about, and neither one of them were, well, the Spot thing was kind of pointless, to be fair, but still, I don't count that because it wasn't done like for tension, to create tension in the episode, because there was tension in the A plot. What I hate is, like, this whole geological unstable, nobody gives a shit about it. The episode hardly even devotes any time to it. As I say, Juliana Tanner's husband is completely pointless and unnecessary, and why is he even fucking there? So this definitely falls in that category of having a useless B plot that nobody gives two shits about. So, yeah, I think it's the only one for season 7. Because, no, I don't count Force of Nature because it's the reverse of the trope. It actually makes it quite unique. Anyway, final comment is from Brandon Neal Howes, who says, Data has a mother. Well, I guess must be thankful that she isn't played by Brent Spiner. Oh, that's a good one I didn't think about. Yeah, you notice like all those family members, or most of them that Stephen Kennedy mentioned, all played by Brent Spiner. Anyway, I enjoy the actress's portrayal and her relationship with Data, short as it is, but I find the fact that she is an android and doesn't know a bit hard to swallow. Does her different species husband know the fact? Are they able to have sexual relations? Will the truth come out when she dies? And the husband hates Data because he is identical to Lore. Sheesh. I really want to give this a higher rating, but I cannot. 4 modesty programs out of 10. So, questions. Does her different species husband know that fact? No. Are they able to have sexual relations? Yes. Will the truth come out when she dies? Yes. And the husband hates Data. Oh, that's not a question. So I answered your 3 questions. I think the sexual relations thing, I think it's implied because Crusher said that her body was meant to imitate or emulate human and fool people into thinking that they're human. So that, and even Data, who even is not supposed to fool people into thinking he's human, is capable of sexual relations. So absolutely, she would be as well. And because she wouldn't be fertile or anything, but because of her age, she wouldn't be expected to be anyway. So that would be a convenient cover. And the truth, talked about the truth will come out when she dies. Absolutely, which is why they probably should have told her. And yeah, they make it very clear that the useless, pointless husband doesn't know. Clearly he doesn't know, especially the way that he's, prejudiced against Data. But I do like the continuity in this episode. I do like that they mentioned Lore, and I do like they call back to Offspring and Silicon Avatar about, with the whole Data's logs and remembers all the journals and whatnot. So I love the continuity. That is one good thing about this episode. But I just always had the feeling that this was added. This always felt like added canon that was like crammed in there after the fact. And a lot of it is. Because in Data lore, Dr. Soong was dead. That was the official canon. But then they decided to retcon that to say, oh, actually he was alive and he escaped it. And and so they added a lot to, they just keep piling onto Data's backstory. And I don't know, maybe this one felt just extra where the other ones didn't because it was so late. It was like in the last season. And after I had already watched Star Trek a billion times, and I don't know. Maybe it's my personal experience, but it always felt like it was just added on. Anyway, thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Inheritance out of 10 is going to be a 7. Very good. Now, I was very torn on my rating for this. I was thinking of maybe a 6. But I want to be generous this episode and give it the benefit of the doubt because, as I said, as I rewatched it and tried to look past that barrier of the fact that it felt like this was a giant retcon, because it is, it's actually a really interesting story. It's actually a touching story about Data, and I love episodes that explore Data's humanity, and they mentioned Lal, thank God, and I think they should have kept in that deleted scene with Troy because that was really good. And so, yeah, that from the character aspect of it, it was a really good Data character story. But I don't know how I feel about that reveal that she's an android. To me, that's like they're already on shaky grounds with the retconning his mother, and now they're going to retcon there's another android on top of that Dr. Soong created like an android that's like super more advanced than Data, like shortly after he created Data. Like, what sense does that make? And how convenient. But I, as I said, I'm mixed on that because I do like the moral dilemma that they created where Data has to decide whether or not to tell her, where there's no right answer. And I love that. I love when Star Trek presents a moral dilemma where there is no right answer and everyone can have a different opinion on what the right thing to do is in this case, but there are no right answers. So that aspect of it I did like. So yeah, I'm actually really mixed on this episode. I think my opinion of it has gone up, but it's still, it definitely doesn't get to an 8 or a 9 because it's, yeah, the whole retcon thing is really difficult to look past. And yeah, the revelation at the end that she's an android is, I don't know, only half works for me. It's a bit on shaky ground. So 7 out of 10 for me. So that is it for my review of Inheritance. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to leave a like, leave a comment below. What did you think about this episode? Did you find this a retcon? Or did you find it easy to look past that? Also, if you would really like to support the channel, you can support me on Patreon. There'll be a link to that in the description below. Different tiers for different budgets, different rewards, such as the patron only series I do where I revisit reviews that I've already made, and pre-releases 2 weeks in advance, and you can request a video, make a comment for me to read in my videos, all that kind of thing you can check out on Patreon. But if you're unable to support me on Patreon or just don't feel like it, then you can support the channel by subscribing, liking, all that kind of thing really helps me out as well. So let's see what's coming up on the channel. Wednesday will be my review for Second Sight. Thursday will be Lower Decks episode 6. And of season 5, that is. And then Saturday, reviewing Parallels, classic episode. And then next Monday, I'll be back to Deep Space Nine, reviewing the episode Sanctuary. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.